So the answer for people is a little bit more intelligent approach and really just bringing in some other categories, right? We have muscular strength, we have cardiovascular conditioning. Many people are familiar with lifting weights and doing cardio, but there are other facets to all of this too, because there's other systems involved. We've got our neuromuscular system, we've got our neural network, all our brain controlling the movements that we do, getting feedback from the environment. We've got our muscular system itself, and then we've got our skeletal system. And the interaction of all three of those is really important for that long-term process. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna have multiplanar movements. Doesn't mean our whole workout has to be built around rotation, rotation, rotation. But what this refers to is the fact that many people only work out, when we work out the mirror muscles, right? Boom, what do I see in the front? What do I turn around and see in the back? Which is not a problem, right? There's nothing wrong with those aesthetic goals. I myself love to do that type of training too. But many people also, in doing so, they work in what we call the sagittal plane, which would be, as you guys see me right now, if I was stuck in a hallway and I could move forward and I could move back, I could flex and I could extend, that would be our sagittal plane, right? Our frontal plane, I'm gonna call our snowflake plane. This is a plane, if I was stuck in a hallway, I could move side to side, back and forth. So think about all the exercises I could do like that. And then our third plane of motion is going to be transverse. So the easiest way to think about this is rotation through the core, but you'll find we talk about other joints, like my shoulder joint, my humerus has rotation. I've got it in my femur as well. And that's where a lot of people may undertrain that frontal plane and that transverse plane movement. So first, especially with clients, we're gonna wanna make sure that they can get into good positions with those ranges of motion in those planes. And then down the road, we'll start to give them more exercises where we're loading them in those different planes of motion. Because as you can see, a lot of injuries for some people may happen in that transverse plane where they're just not used to having to be strong there, right? Maybe they go to pick up their kid in an odd angle, and all of a sudden they've got a brace in the core and the strength is not there, right? So we're gonna do multiplanar programs. We'll give you examples, especially on the mobility, flexibility side, to integrate that in. Full muscle action spectrum. We're going to integrate not only concentric muscle contractions, which is probably what you're most familiar with. A concentric muscle contraction is going to be the muscle shortening phase of that exercise. So if we're talking bicep curls, from this extended position of my arm, as I flex the elbow, my muscle and my fibers are coming together. So I'm decreasing that angle. That's a concentric muscle contraction. I've got that dumbbell that I'm pulling up and I'm fighting gravity. An eccentric muscle contraction is gonna be the lowering phase, right? So if you guys have done much hypertrophy, bodybuilding type training, you may have had exercises like negatives, pull-ups, or bicep curls, or even bench presses where we're really slowly controlling down. And that's a great way. It's a great method for hypertrophy training, partially because we're actually stronger in eccentric muscle contractions, right? We've got that concentric contraction, which a lot of people think about, but if you want to build larger muscle fibers, going nice controlled where we're allowed to have time under tension, which is a really important variable, creates little microfiber tears in that muscle, and it's very effective way of training. But what you'll also get, even with new clients, we don't have to have a lot of weight, but slowing those motions down, this tempo we're going to talk about, it's not only good from a muscle adaptation standpoint, but from a neurological standpoint early on, it gives them time to slow down the movement and do it with good technique and form. And legitimately, just like if you were learning to shoot a free throw, right? I don't know if you guys played any sports. I played basketball my whole life growing up, and I would go out and shoot 100 free throws at a time. It was neurological practice, so it becomes natural. Exercises are very much the same thing for people early on. So we're gonna slow those eccentrics down. And then one of those muscle contractions that many people don't train at all is going to be isometric. So that would be, if we had our concentric muscle contraction for the bicep, I had the eccentric muscle contraction lower down. If I just had a weight there and I was holding it and not moving, I have contraction happening, otherwise that weight would fall. But that in and of itself is an important contraction that we need to train as well. And for a lot of clients, we're gonna really focus on doing that at the end ranges of motion with the movements that we start to teach them. So a good example would be if I was doing the push-up, right? I've got my lowering down to the ground, that's the eccentric portion. I'm gonna pause for a second there and I'm gonna be contracted, I'm gonna be tight, I'm gonna be engaging my muscles, but isometrically, right? And that teaches my body the stability in the joint at that position. And then I'm going to concentrically contract to push myself back up, and I'm going to pause at the top as well. So those isometric muscle contractions are really important, because especially in the exercise environment, it's also a very common time and place to get injured, right? If I'm doing a pull-up and I lower down really quickly and try to go back up, that moment of instability in my shoulder, there comes along with that a big risk of injury. So early on, we want to integrate those isometric contractions at the top and the bottom, little pauses for people. And not just because it's going to make it hard as heck, and I'm going to encourage you to try that tomorrow with all of your exercise and routines, but it's also a great thing for teaching them the right mode and mechanics. It's going to prevent us from using too much weight early on, and we're going to get a lot out of that from that neurological learning standpoint. So that's one that a lot of people would benefit from. And then what we call a proprioceptively enriched environment, and if I could have some like flashing lights around here for you guys from a test taking standpoint, I'm sure that's going to come up on your exam. Proprioception refers to the feedback that we get from our environment, right? So if I'm standing on one foot, all of a sudden, I'm not thinking about it, but I'm getting information about where my body is at relative to space and the ground. You know, I've got little micro contractions happening in my ankle to keep me balanced. So I'm getting feedback, this proprioceptive information from the environment. So training in a proprioceptive enriched environment doesn't mean you're going to do everything on a single leg. You're going to have to stand on a Bosu ball for all of your exercises. But what it does talk about is changing our base of support and changing our levers and our positions, because all of that is going to force our body to learn to stabilize better. And you know, and if you're an athlete who wants to apply that in the world where you're out cutting and moving quickly, great, that's going to definitely apply there. But even if you're just the average person who wants to move better, you want to prevent falls in an older population, then enriching this environment proprioceptively, that could be, again, it could be instead of a two-legged squat with a nice normal position, I'm getting into more split stance lunge positions. It could be rather than a two-arm dumbbell press, I'm starting to do single arm. I'm increasing the challenge and the demands. I'm minimizing some of my base of support with the ground, and I'm throwing offset loads on the body so that I have to force my body to stabilize more. So we'll get into more training protocols from that, but just know that a lot of people don't train that way. A lot of people don't necessarily include movement in all